On my
Hmm.
podcast, one of the things that I constantly am coaching my guests on in their storytelling is if I ask you to tell me about a time when, share an experience, you
Hmm.
have to use the word I or we
Okay.
because you are reliving it. And you're telling me things like what you were trying to do, what your thought process was, what your emotional state was, what you were deliberating between, what you were afraid of or trying to avoid or hoping for.
Meet my friend, Dr. Laura Sicola. We've been through group mastermind training together, and she is the real deal. Look, if you want to do more by doing less, by building your brand and authority, the best way to do it is not just through communication, but through hypnotic storytelling. And Laura is the expert in this area. She gives us the exact steps on how to do it, how to be authentic. It's awesome. Listen in and good luck. Do more by doing less. With me, Charles Alexander, for small business owners, startups, and busy folks. Look, I've gotten to know Dr. Laura. We've done a little group coaching together. She's awesome. And speaking to influence is exactly why I've got you here. I have personally been able to be lucky enough to be a speaker for a long time now, tons of storytelling. I still have a lot to learn, but a lot of folks that I talk to are still, they want to do more by doing less through storytelling.
Sure.
This is your wheelhouse, man. I've heard you say this, and tell me what it means to be a hypnotic storyteller. Am I going to be on stage at Zany's and somebody's going to cluck like a chicken?
No clucking like a chicken, no doing anything that's going to embarrass you later on. The idea is in storytelling, there's you use a story to be able to relate to another person, to help
Mm-hmm.
them get more engaged in that conversation in whatever you're trying to explain to them. And have you ever had one of those moments, Charles, where maybe you're driving and you're listening to an awesome podcast or the
Yeah.
radio or something, and all of a sudden you get to your destination and you go, "Oh my gosh, I don't remember driving here."
Even worse, yesterday I was in the garage and I just sat there because I wasn't done listening to a story. But
Yes.
yeah,
And it can be maybe you're watching a movie or you're reading a book and you look at your clock and it's whatever time, and then
yeah,
you look for like 5 more minutes. You just read the last something or other, and then you look and another 25 minutes have
yeah, that's
evaporated
right.
because you're engrossed. So that you literally go into a light state of trance-like hypnosis so
Hmm.
that you're oblivious to whatever else is going on around you. And that utter focus is what I like to refer to as hypnotic storytelling. It's how you keep people sucked in. You keep them focused
Right.
where they forget there's a cell phone in their hands. They forget they can toggle to a different screen or to a
Hmm.
different app or something. The hypnotic storytelling is all the little, I'm a cognitive linguist by background,
Sure.
all the little details about how you tell that story, what you do with your voice, what kinds of words you choose that get people to relive the experience, to experience it with you as you're telling it, as opposed to just kind of nodding their head. You're
Hmm.
nodding their heads along as they go, okay, yes, 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 4 is 8, 8 plus 8 is
Sure.
16. I understand. It's not about I understand. It's I'm with you. I'm in the flow with you. That's what we want to achieve.
How in the world? Okay. How do I do that?
There's many things involved. One, if you're actually going into a story mode instead of just an explanation or just advice mode, the pronoun matters. On my
Hmm.
podcast, one of the things that I constantly am coaching my guests on in their storytelling is if I ask you to tell me about a time when, share an experience, you
Hmm.
have to use the word I or we
Okay.
because you are reliving it and you're telling me things like what you were trying to do, what your thought process was, what your emotional state was, what you were deliberating between, what you were afraid of or trying to avoid or hoping for. And in describing those things, we connect with that on a very human level. We're experiencing the emotions with you, not just the events of the story. And so when you're talking more in the I, and you can use also third persons, maybe you're talking to someone else in this story, a client or a
Hmm.
prospect or your direct report or something.
Sure.
I said this and he said that. It still is in the story. The mistake we make is that we toggle out of that and we shift into the rhetorical you. Somebody will be telling me this great story. I was trying to do this, worried about that. And then when you're leading a store, when
Yeah.
you're trying to do this and you got all these people and you're under pressure, wah, 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 wah. You just shifted into the generic, into the rhetorical. You're not telling me what you did, what worked, what didn't work, what you regret, what you wanted to try. There's no emotional. It's just generic, generic, generic,
Martin
generic.
Scorsese wouldn't do that.
Never, never. Now, that's different. If someone's trying
Sure.
to ask you for advice, then sure, give me direct advice. Laura, if you are looking to do this, I recommend you do that. That's not a rhetorical, generic advice that maybe you never followed, but you just heard that it sounded good when you read it on the fortune cookies. You thought you'd share it with me. That doesn't bring me connecting with you. That doesn't make me trust you. I have no reason to trust you. I can read a fortune cookie even for myself. But telling it in that first person with third person, meaning first person meaning I, talking about yourself, third person meaning who's the other person, the other people, the other group as they relate to the story. Because it could be just a story about them, not about you. But it still has to be in that narrative mode without shifting into that rhetorical you.
In that storytelling mode,
Mhm.
and this is a discussion I've been having a ton lately with folks talking about content creation or presentations or whatever else. So everybody has chat GPT'd everything to death, which is great because it's great for automating. One thing I keep hearing from folks that I trust, and I'm saying this too, going forward, storytelling is going to be the thing that differentiates everybody in every way humanly possible. And that's just not from the stage of a TED Talk. That's in whatever, your email marketing, your direct ads, everything. With that being said, what do you tell your clients or the folks that listen to you about personal storytelling versus, I don't know, grabbing a well-used case study versus something they heard Tony Robbins say?
All of which are good. All of which have their purpose and their value. And I think what matters more than anything is that you always have to play to your audience. What is the situation? What are they looking for in the moment? Do you need to demonstrate that you've been through this yourself? Is that what's going to convince the audience that they should take this because you've experienced it? Versus, do they want the authority? Do they go, well, maybe that worked for you, but how big are you? You're a solopreneur. You're just a this or you're just a that. But if you could say, well, let me tell you a story from Tony Robbins, who's got 8 billion people working for him and running seminars of 10,000 a pop. This came straight from his lips. Here's the quote. And to be able to anchor it in that thought leader who has massive social credibility and everything else along those lines, who will this group believe? Maybe this is a group of people who are anti-Tony Robbins. Okay, then I wouldn't go that direction.
Right.
So, but the idea is my 3 C's, Charles, are all about, no matter what the conversation is, one-on-one or public speaking, podcast, TED Talk, you have to master the 3 C's, the ability to command the room, connect with the audience, and close the deal. Commanding the room is that ability in the way that you speak right from the beginning, both what you say and how you say it. Does it capture people's attention? Does it grab them? Does it hold their attention? Is there something about the way that you talk that just compels them to continue to home in on what you're saying, to listen, to pay attention? That's commanding the room. Connecting with the audience is somehow through your stories, through the data, through the case studies, etc. It's establishing a mutual understanding that you understand me and I understand you. And through that creates trust and bond, and we move forward. And then closing the deal means getting to yes, not necessarily signing on the dotted line, not necessarily exchanging money, but just can we agree on how to move the needle forward?
Yes to the next step. Ooh,
exactly.
Look at that.
Look at that. That's closing the deal. Command the room, connect with the audience, close the deal. You're talking to a bunch of lawyers who are trying to argue which direction to go. They want case precedents. They want legal arguments. They don't care about personal experience unless it's that you figure it out or someone who figured out how to leverage the situation. That's a story. But otherwise, they want data. They want court cases and whatnot because they need that or no judge is going to buy it. Understanding how to balance stories and evidence, case studies, very important for the context.
When you go back to the 3 C's, first one's command. That's something I changed years ago. I would have the bad habit. You correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah.
When somebody would introduce me, I'd do the thank you, and then I would reintroduce myself because, I don't know, the person who had just read off my terribly long bio that I should have edited didn't embarrass me enough. And then I'm Charles Alexander, and then I tell them who I am and where I'm from. I switched it. Business coach talked me into this, of just coming in with almost TED Talk like, first one I started off with forever, 2 out of every 3 businesses fail, and then I would make a personal story out of
Mhm,
it, and I would even weave my kids into it, mainly to humor myself, but I
sure.
always get a laugh with that, and it
Mhm,
would go then I could go straight into the topic.
yep.
What are you now that I've set myself up for you to tell me that was wrong, what do you tell folks how do you tell them to command immediately?
It's always personal, and again, it depends on what your context is. If it's a podcast and people are tuning in because they like you, they like the stuff that you bring, they're more willing more interested in your personality and things, as opposed to a business meeting with a bunch of people who are like, "No, humor has no place here." At some
Mhm.
places it does. Can you break that ice and actually make someone laugh? It sets the meeting off on a whole different tone. It really is contextually dependent. What will help to establish that authority? How do you what kind of humor is
Sure.
appropriate? There's a difference between commanding respect and demanding respect.
Ooh,
And that's a really important point of distinction because demanding is when you're pounding your fist on the
sure.
desk and saying, "You have to do this. You have to respect me. You have to listen
Mhm.
to me." Good luck with that. If you have to demand it, you will never command it.
I always get a little defensive when a speaker or whoever immediately has, well, stand up or turn to your left, and they start giving me rules to follow right out of the gate because they're trying to. They're cool. They're trying to do an icebreaker, but I always
Mhm.
feel that's how it always makes me feel.
Depends on the context again,
I
who are the
know.
people, who's the speaker, what's the topic, and what's the icebreaker
You're
for
right.
that matter. There are better ways to do it and not so great ways to do it, and some will land really well with some audiences, and others are like, "Oh, no, we're not doing this." I'm doing a room full of public school teachers. I can give them crayons and scissors
Yeah.
and construction paper for a metaphor of a program and or a, lesson, and it works. I'm not doing that with a bunch of IT developers. It's not gonna fly. I'll give them Legos. That'll fly really well. I
Yeah.
will be miss popularity with that, but not a bunch of lawyers. They're not gonna want the Legos. Who's your audience? What's the icebreaker? What speaks their language?
You're talking about storytelling. One thing I had to get over this years ago, and I get little compliments here and there. They're not compliments, they're backhanded. I have a face for radio, but that's different. A lot of people, if they're not necessarily even standing on stage or if they want to do a podcast, if they want to do a video, is one common theme. I bet you even know where I'm headed. I hate the sound of my
Voice.
oh my gosh. How do you get folks over that?
Well, fortunately, you don't have to worry about that. You've got a great voice. The At least on my completely
Well,
subjective
yeah.
opinion, because
I appreciate that.
that is always a opinions are never right
Sure.
or wrong. But
Well, yours is right. It's right
so
on the money.
of course I am.
Yeah.
That's my job. I'm supposed to be right. Yours is great.
Um,
There we go. All right. Tangent notwithstanding, it's your voice is an instrument that you were born with. And think of it this way: if you were born with a flute, you will never make it sound like a tuba, but you can learn to play it masterfully. And you can learn to play jazz, you can learn to play classical, you can learn to play pop, you can learn to play soul. So the question is how will you learn to play your instrument in order to pivot for
mhm.
those different moods, those different styles, those different audiences? Learn to masterfully play your voice. And there are things that we do that regularly undermine our ability and make it sound like a third grader playing a clarinet for the first time
Sure.
and you're waiting for the glass to start shattering any day now. But here's a couple of quick tips to how to more masterfully play your own vocal instrument. First, be careful for there one particular pattern that really undermines your authority, and it's a pattern called upspeak. Especially if you're somebody who feels like your voice is too squeaky, too high, lacks authority. Upspeak is that pattern that I'm demonstrating now where your voice
Oh,
goes
you're
up.
finishing everything in a question?
Yes, that inflected
Oh,
question, that rise in your
yes.
pitch. And now, for anybody out there who's going, well, but that's like a Valley Girl thing, right? Like the
Mhm.
young teenage girl, Valley Girl thing.
No, it's not.
No, I hate to tell you all this, especially guys, a Y chromosome is not a vaccine.
Huh.
You are not immune to this by any stretch of the imagination. Men and women, older, younger, whatever race, creed,
I have
etc.
seen top tier CEOs, CFOs, C whatevers do this, and it drives me bananas.
Yep. And it drives most people bananas. Often we don't recognize it when men do it because we have what's called confirmation bias,
Yes.
where if we have an assumption about, well, men don't do that, women do that, or this group does and that group doesn't, our brain doesn't acknowledge that
Right.
because it doesn't fit with the expectations if we hear a guy do it. But if we hear a woman do it, then it's like, oh, see, I knew it. But anyway, be careful with that rise where you're in that kind of a stream of consciousness mode. Well, I
Right.
want to talk about this and I want to mention this and then there's this because it sounds like to your comment a moment ago that you're inflecting a question, specifically what's called a tag question. Tag questions are when you end a statement with something like, right? Okay. If you make your statement, I think we need to follow this path forward. Okay.
Does that
Right.
make sense?
Right. Exactly. Those are the kinds of comments. And if you wouldn't ever say that, or that you shouldn't say it, but you inflect it with your voice instead, you are undermining your authority because you are transferring it to the listener. If I'm constantly begging
Oh,
you for implied
right.
validation because I want you to say, yes, Laura, you're right, Laura. I know, Laura. I get it, Laura. You make sense, Laura. Then you're telling me that I'm right. That means you have the authority, the knowledge, the expertise to tell me if I'm right or wrong. I just transferred all of my authority to you. Put vocal periods at the end of the sentence. It also allows you to say a little bit more in the lower part of your register, more in your chest resonance, and that will keep it from going higher, especially if you're someone who feels like they already have a really high voice, male or
Right.
female, and you wish it had a little more weight, a little more heft. Then don't end up. If you're going to end up on the top part of your register because that's where you end everything, why would you sit in the upper registers? Bring it down. Have that period at the end of the sentence. It allows you to sit in that weight, in that gravitas, and I think you'll like the sound of your voice better.
You brought up something that is a good segue here. The point of anybody listening that wants to be a storyteller, that wants to get better, that wants to connect, that wants to command, they're doing it, and correct me if I'm wrong, because they want to be seen as the authority, the go-to expert.
Mhm.
Because if Charles tells enough stories and they're relatable and he doesn't end everything in a question, then I might think he knows what he's talking about as a business
Mhm.
coach. I might want to do a 4-day work week just like he does.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the importance of storytelling as a means, and not just that, whatever else do we need? Because that's part of what you've been doing for a long time. How does somebody use that to become the go-to expert?
So the go-to expert, which is part of the programming that I teach, et cetera, when I say the go-to expert, if you are looking for somebody who has these kinds of services that they offer, or you're looking for a speaker for your event, you're looking for a guest for your podcast, you're looking for someone to come and address your Rotary Club, your lunch and learn, your networking group,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, think about the questions that you ask yourself as you're trying to find somebody. Well, who has expertise in an area that's relevant? Who is interesting? Who has an actual point of view and isn't just going to tell us the same stuff we've heard a million times? Who's actually interesting as a speaker? Who's engaging and enjoyable to listen to? Because yeah, we want information, but it shouldn't be boring at the same time. If it's boring, I'm not coming back, even if it's
Right.
useful. And then where have we seen this person before? Who else have they spoken to? It's almost like when you're dating, you
Mhm.
see somebody who looks kind of interesting, but then you go, well, who else have they dated? I don't know. Because if they've only dated
Reflection.
people that I'm going, oh, they slum it down there. I'm not dating that guy. Forget it.
Nope.
No, but it's like, oh, he dated that person and that person. Oh, okay. He must be
That's right.
attached. They become more interesting, right? That somebody else has been interested in them first. People, organizations need, or individuals need to vet you first. They're going to want to check out and see who else has found you useful and interesting. As you get on more, the question first is, of course, how to get on podcast stages, talking in front of groups to start,
Mhm.
but then building out and being so good when you're there. And it's a balance of what I like to call infotainment, which is different from content light.
Correct.
Content light is, okay, it was cute, but useless. Infotainment is it was valuable and enjoyable in the process. And storytelling makes content enjoyable, makes it relatable, even funny, perhaps, depending on the story. But when you are able to do it over and over, your brand is consistent in its delivery, in the experience that you bring people, then that makes them trust you because they're able to say, "Ooh, go get this person." Or maybe
Mhm.
it's not for even to speak, but it's like, "Okay, I'm working with this person for as my insurance broker or as my financial advisor, and here's why I trust them. Let me refer you. I'm willing to put my name, my neck out on the line, my reputation on the line by giving you my recommendation to talk to this person because they served me well. They did serve my group well, and I believe that they will give you that same experience." That's the go-to thought leader. When someone says, who could do X, Y, and Z, your name pops into their head first. The ability to tell stories and to connect with people. If they're not already your client or you're serving them somehow, then that's the experience that we want them to have. I had that experience there. I saw that person talk
Sure.
there. I heard that person talk there. Bring them over here and make them do it again. That's the go-to thought leader.
And you pointed out one thing in there is that they're very consistent and they're they're being so good that they get work again and again or get opportunities again and again. I'm
Yes.
re-listening. You ever read the book or listened to the book Born Standing Up?
No. Tell me about it.
Well, that's Steve Martin's memoir biography, and so many of them are just really self-indulgent. Indulgent. His is friggin' awesome. I'm listening to it for the third time, and one of the key points he makes in there is be so good they can't ignore you.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, he wasn't a storyteller, but he rose to the top of the comedy ranks years ago. I know that's a sidebar, but what you said just resonated in terms of you've got to get the reps in too. And I have so many people that I've worked with over the years that want to do, I got a business helping people create explainer videos, or they want to do their own video, or they want to, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to get good right away. And I think what you're saying in part of all of this is that they've got to get the reps in to get to a point where they're so good they can't be ignored.
Yes, which is why it's valuable to get on podcasts, to get on in other small places. Heck, I saw an advertisement, not an advertisement, but a flyer in the email the other day from my son's school district, and they're looking for speakers to come in and speak on at career day at the middle school.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
I love
that's
that.
an audience. I mean, in some ways it's an easy audience, and in some ways it can be a harder audience because you're gonna have to work a lot harder to
Okay.
entertain a bunch of
Yeah.
8th graders. But,
Yes.
there it's interesting. See what works. Get out there, tell some of your stories. They don't wanna know the ins and outs of constitutional law.
No.
They don't wanna know how tax spreadsheets work, but they would love to know if you are a tax accountant, why?
Yeah. Why
What
would
is
you
it
do that?
that you love? I mean, I had an accountant for 15 years as a personal accountant who I loved because he geeked out on accounting. He was the only person I know who thought tax accounting was fun.
Yep.
Great. That's the person I want to hire.
So
Go in and tell a bunch of 8th graders what's fun about it. Are you a puzzle junkie? Do you love solving mysteries? Is Sudoku? Is it like a giant Sudoku in a book that's this
yeah.
thick? What is it? Help them understand. Tell the story. What problems have you solved? Who have you helped? What kind of reaction do you get from people by doing their taxes? Tell stories and leverage every audience possible. And at the dinner table, don't hold your family hostage by telling them stories that never end. That's a
Mhm.
different space. But any place that you can connect with people and share your passion, share your expertise by telling a story that gives value, as long as you make it about them. That's the biggest
Sure.
thing. It can't just be all about, hey, I want you to know about me because I'm awesome.
Right.
No, I want you to know this about me because I believe it will bring value to you.
There's a relatable story in there. I can give you points 1, 2, and 3 based off this, and then we turn it about you and give you some instructions on how to do that.
Yep.
And I love all of the things you're saying. And I've heard people call it the rubber chicken tour when they're going to speak at the chamber, they're going to speak at the Rotary, they're going to the Kiwanis Club, they're going anywhere. Have Mike will travel. How do you? So for a lot of folks listening, they want to transition that after they've gotten some of that under their belt, and they want to start getting on podcasts. Do you have any tips for moving that forward?
Sure. I mean, an easy place to go is there are a lot of directories of for podcasts, for conferences, et cetera, where you get on your mailing list and you'll get a weekly newsletter or something that'll come out and tell you what calls for speakers are out there or what podcasts are looking for guests. Very easy one. It's called podcastguests.com.
Mm-hmm.
Another is
Yep.
podmatch.com. Just go fill out the profile. It's not much different from filling out a dating profile at that point. It's just a little bit more about the stuff you like to talk about. And it's a great way to let people know that you're available.
Wrapping up the storytelling, becoming an expert talk piece of the puzzle that I often think gets overlooked is what I'm doing now, if you're listening, this does good. But having some body language, like if somebody tied my hands together, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to say a word. How does that play into any type of storytelling?
Well, when you are telling any story or when you are speaking of any sort, accurate credibility is at the foundation of leadership. And as part of that credibility, the way that you communicate has to align all three channels of communication: your words, your voice, and your body language, the verbal, the vocal, and the visual. Part of reliving a story as you're telling it is getting your body into it. I mean, if you're telling about the time that you were on the biggest, scariest roller coaster of your life, but you just sit there and you don't move the entire time, your face doesn't move,
Right.
it's almost physically impossible to truly tell the story with and not have your body move at all except for your mouth. And it's not to say that you need to be super extroverted. You mentioned Tony Robbins before. He bounces around the stage
Oh
for
my
10
God.
hours at a time. It's a very different, and not for good or bad. I mean, I've attended his stuff. He's amazing, but you don't have to be that. Heck, you don't have
Right.
to be me or be you. Just But we do want to get our bodies into it. We do want to allow yourself to experience the stories that you're telling. Now, there's again, if you're in a square that's just this big because it's a
Right.
video that you're watching versus if you're on a stage or you're sitting at the head of a conference table, or so know your space, and your physical communication should be more or less proportional, shall we say, to the size of the space that you're trying to fill up. If I'm here on video, I'm not going to be gesticulating wildly and walking in this direction and moving over
Mhm.
there. That doesn't make
You're
sense. But
not gonna be the
similarly,
used car thing flapping
right,
around.
right, right. Those little balloons with the
Yeah.
wavy arms in front of them. But at the same time, if you are on a stage, you don't just wanna have little T-Rex arms where just the wrists are
Little
flapping and
alligator arm.
you haven't moved from the same,
Sure.
like, 2 foot by 2 foot box the entire time. It does. Your gestures matter. That includes your facial expressions, that includes your head motion, and it's also what not to do. I can't tell you the number of people that I've seen in video where they'll be in the swivel chair like this, and
Oh
they're
my
swinging
god.
back and forth
Yep.
as they're talking, or they're all slumped down and they're just in a really relaxed pose. I saw a speaker in a virtual conference doing this, and I thought, "Am I boring you? Because you're the one talking. If you're bored, there's a problem here."
Yeah.
And so, yes, the physical communication, your body language always matters because before you finish word one, much less sentence or story one, people are going to gauge split second about you based on how you look and your facial expressions, your body language, how you're groomed or dressed, all that kind of stuff. And that will become a filter for how they brace themselves to receive whatever they think you're going to say. So if
Sure.
you look like you're just kind of sitting there and waiting your turn
Right.
to talk, they're going to go, "Oh, she doesn't even look like she wants to be here. This is going to be painful. All right, well, let me check my phone while I'm kind of listening and I'll
Mhm.
multitask." As opposed to if you get here and you're really excited to share whatever it is that you want to tell and why, and here's the value in it, and et cetera. I'm going, okay. I mean, maybe the personality isn't exactly the same,
Sure.
but
But they're
at least
excited
they
to be
seem
here.
like they wanna be here
Yeah.
and they seem like they believe they got values. All right, I'm game. Let's
They're
see what you got.
smiling and nodding, yeah.
Yes, exactly. There's I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt. You do need to be very careful about what you are non-verbally communicating.
Good God. I just folded my arms when you said that, and then I got nervous.
Okay.
Look, this everything flew by super quick. A lot of great info. Make a quick transition since this is do more by doing less.
Yeah.
Dr. Laura, what's one thing that you should probably be doing less of right now?
Writing proposals and taking inbound
Food, writing
sales calls.
proposals.
Yeah.
What would you do then if you couldn't write the proposal? But how would you get that done?
Delegate it.
Boom. It's a great answer. Probably almost AI that thing at this point. Who knows?
I have heard that you can. I still confess to being a little intimidated by the whole thing, but yeah, I
Understand.
really should.
If you get somebody else to take more of the inbound calls and the proposal writing, what will that let you do more of?
Actually doing the speaking and the coaching, because and I also know that because I hate proposal writing, I put it off, which is stupid because if somebody says, "Hey, Laura, we're interested, send us a
I know. That's
proposal,"
how we make
and I
money.
don't exactly. Why am I gonna wait a week or longer because I just hate getting around to writing them? let somebody write it and shoot it off in the next 48 hours or less at that point, because it's then going to be a lot faster when they turn around and say, okay, let me pay you. So I can do the job that gets us paid. Anybody can write the proposal. Let's don't get stupid. What I mean, we,
Hey, I'm right there with you. I understand that's everybody's got a cross to bear in terms of things they don't want to quite let go of yet, or they don't want to do.
yep.
And that's right there on the list. But now we've got it nailed. We know what Laura's going to be giving up so she can do more of. Hey,
And I am working on that.
you are. I know you are. What cool things do you have coming up, and how can someone find you?
You mentioned it earlier. The Go-To Thought Leader is my newest program. It is small group intensive mastermind style, where it's 8 weeks to establishing exactly that, your brand as the go-to thought leader. If you are looking to get on more stages, on more microphones, get those profiles written, figure out who to talk in front of, what stories do you want to tell, and how do you tell them well? How about sound bites? What are your go-tos so that people remember them easily? What are you doing with your voice? Have you ever thought about that? All that kind of fun stuff. How to get your name, your brand out there far and wide, because again, you are your brand. People need to buy into you before they buy into your product or service. How do we get you out there? That's my course. You can check out go-to-thoughtleader.com for the course, and otherwise we'll leave it at that. But you can also just check out my website, which is laurasicola.com.
Both great URLs. Glad you grabbed them.
Well,
all right, Dr. Laura, I appreciate it. And you have a lovely day.
Thank you, Charles. It's a pleasure.
Bye. Don't take off just yet. I've created a new program just for you, helping overworked entrepreneurs create their very own 4-day work week in 90 days or less. Look, if you'd rather spend more time with family, friends, traveling, exercising, having the time to do what you want instead of, putting out never-ending fires, tackling another to-do list, and checking email at 9 p.m., then go to my website, yourcharlesalexander.com. If you've created the income you want but don't have the time freedom you deserve, then this is for you. And as always, if you don't, an angel may actually lose its wings. True story. Have a great day.